Hello everyone. Let's look at the poem Refugee Blues by W.H. Auden today. In the last class, we had talked about the title, Refugee Blues, and blues, how it refers to a kind of music, a song that laments an event which is depressing. Now, in this poem, we find the refugee crisis, like the context which we discussed earlier, that ensued from the exodus of Jews from Germany during Nazism. The poem, however, rings true of the refugee crisis all over the world even today. Say this city has 10 million souls. Some are living in mansions, some are living in holes. Yet there's no place for us, my dear. Yet there's no place for us. The use of the word souls here, it gives a kind of holiness or a kind of spirituality to the reference to the people here. When we look at the people, you find that there are different kinds of people. Some live in mansions, some live in holes. They are either rich or maybe they're poor, some are British, some are Indian. There are different people. All people are different, and society actually treats them very differently. But in the case of refugees, we find that it is totally different for them. Even if they live in holes, they feel like they do not belong anywhere, not even in the holes, not even with the poor people. So the situation of a refugee is totally different. It's very difficult. Once we had a country and we thought it fair. Look in the atlas and you'll find it there. We cannot go there now, my dear. We cannot go there now. But we could also say that it could represent either Germany or maybe it's even Palestine, the promised land of the Jews. Anyway, the refugees now are displaced and they do not have a country. And they thought it fair and now they can find it only in the atlas. And again, you have the repetition. We cannot go there now, my dear. We cannot go there now. In the village churchyard, there grows an old yew. Every time it blossoms anew. Old passports can't do that, my dear. Old passports can't do that. The image here is an optimistic one in the beginning. In the first two lines, you find the old yew, which is mentioned, which conjures an image that is typical of England. And the blossoms, all this give you an image of spring and rebirth and hope. But the third line to the reality where old passports are no longer valid. This again talks about the sad plight of the refugees. In the next two stanzas, we find a relationship between the state and the refugee here. The consul banged the table and said, if you've got no passport, you are officially dead. But we are still alive, my dear, but we are still alive. Went to a committee, they offered me a chair, asked me politely to return next year. But where shall we go today, my dear? But where shall we go today? You find that the state is polite but firm in rejecting them. The state is so uncaring, and you find that the refugees are not given any civil rights. That's the situation all over the world. You find as refugees, they are not accepted, and if they're not accepted, the refugees will not be allowed to get jobs or to take part in society normally. So again, the repetition, the refrain, but where shall we go today, my dear? But where shall we go today? Came to a public meeting. The speaker got up and said, if we let them in, they will steal our daily bread. He was talking of you and me, my dear. He was talking of you and me. This stanza talks of a political meeting maybe and the British people complaining. And Auden clearly thinks that these people are very selfish. There is the reference to daily bread, which is, of course, part of a Christian prayer. And here, the refugees are considered to be thieves because you have the expression steal our daily bread. So, Auden is bringing out the paradox here of how you have the Christian prayer on one side and people claiming to be Christian, and the people are behaving so unchristianly or uncharitably. Thought I heard the thunder rumbling in the sky. It was Hitler over Europe saying they must die. Oh, we were in his mind, my dear. We were in his mind. Thunder rumbling in the sky here is a metaphor for Hitler's angry speech. If you think about the war, it is again a very noisy, violent affair, and you find the bombing and aircraft and all those stuff, and the aircraft that dominated the skies of and the earth during the World War, and that is equated with the thunder rumbling in the sky. Saw a poodle in a jacket fastened with a pin, saw a door open and a cat let in. But they weren't German Jews, my dear, but they weren't German Jews. Here you see that the pets are treated so well, but what is so sad is that the concern for pets is not there in the case of human beings. There is no similar concern or care to fellow human beings. The next two stanzas also, you find that there is this animal imagery which continues. Went down the harbor and stood upon the quay. Saw the fish swimming as if they were free. Only 10 feet away, my dear, only 10 feet away. Walked through a wood, saw the birds in the trees. They had no politicians and sang at their ease. They weren't the human race, my dear. They weren't the human race. The analogy here is between the free natural world and the human world. You see how free the fish and the birds are. They don't have any borders, they don't have any politics. And this contrast between the free natural world and the human world of prejudice and depression is what is brought out in these two stanzas. This analogy, this simple comparison brings out the plight of the refugees. The next two stanzas are dreamlike and poetic. Dreamed I saw a building with 1,000 floors, 1,000 windows, and 1,000 doors. Not one of them was ours, my dear. Not one of them was ours. Stood on a great plain in the falling snow. 10,000 soldiers marched to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me. Here you find that the dream of a building, the dream of space here, of 1,000 windows, 1,000 doors, but none of them are welcome. The refugee has no place to go, and they are shut out of these houses, of these apartments, and you find this dreamlike image where he's standing on a great plain of falling snow, and soldiers are marching to and fro. This is now turning into a nightmare. You find that the poem now ends on a premonition of worse times ahead. Now, if you look at the language of the poem, you can see that it is quite simple, though the message is really complex. It has a very parallel kind of stanza structure. The first two lines rhyme while the last line has got repetitions. Though it's not technically refrain, it is has a function of kind of a refrain. And a refrain is a line or a group of lines that are repeated usually at the end of a stanza. Now these rhymes and repetitions together make the poem musical. It endorses the qualities of blues music, a song of mourning or despair. The poem captures the anguish and cruelty of war, and the ideas represented in this poem is very relevant even today.